In the kingdom of Natra, which is a small and weak country on the verge of collapse due to accumulated debts, Prince Wine, the heir to the throne, appears to take over the country's affairs instead of the king because he is sick. The prince is in his office with his assistant Ninim in a meeting with the kingdom's ministers, and they inform him that there are riots, debts, and a state of chaos dominating the empire. So the prince thanks them and promises them he will solve it, and they leave. Wine gets angry and says loudly he doesn't want to bear the responsibility of a bankrupt country. The best solution is to sell the kingdom to any other nation and live his life in comfort. Ninim tries to encourage him and tells him he is the only hope for this kingdom. The prince replies that the situation the kingdom has reached is impossible to fix, and because the king is sick, he must manage affairs instead of him. He tells her angrily he can't handle all this. He wants to sell the kingdom, but before selling it, Natra must be stronger so its price will be higher and he can benefit from it. Ninim tells him she is tired of his reckless plans. There are more important things he should think about. Their talk is cut off by Queen Falania, who asks to meet Prince Wine. Falania sits and tells him she has good news. The king's condition has improved. The prince is happy and tells her the king must rest during this period because they might be going to war with the Marden nation at any moment. Falania is shocked and Wine explains to her that the king of Marden is looking for a weak kingdom that is easy to take over, and Natra now will be an easy target because of the circumstances they're going through. Falania replies that surely he won't allow them to do that, right? And continues saying she heard the officers and guards talking and how excited they are for the battle, and she tells him with full encouragement that she wishes them victory. Wine smiles and thinks about the battle. The next day, Prince Wine is on his horse in the battlefield and thinking to himself how to defeat Marden while Natra's forces are 6,000 against Marden's 7,000. The minister L'Oreal interrupts his thoughts and tells him, Your Highness, this will be the first battle for our soldiers after long training, and they are ready and waiting for the signal to attack. So he hopes he can support them with words to raise their morale. The prince agrees and moves to stand before the army ranks, and he begins to say words to encourage them, saying victory is not by number of soldiers but by intelligence and will, and he trusts their courage. The soldiers get excited and prepare for battle. On the other side, Orgio, the commander of Marden, stands with his soldiers, and he tells them Natra's soldiers are trying to discourage them. Minister L'Oreal gives the signal to attack. Wine has prepared a plan to lure the enemy between the mountains so he can scatter their large army and strike them with arrows. The battle begins and Prince Wine is surprised that his army is overpowering Marden. Orgio gets very angry and doesn't understand how Natra's army is this strong, and he receives news that the right wing lost control and needs support. Prince Wine is surprised that his plan succeeded. L'Oreal tells him everything is going as planned, and Wine replies yes, we use strong methods and Natra's army can't be compared to any other army. Their talk is cut by a soldier saying, Your Highness, there's pressure and we need reinforcement. So Prince Wine and Commander L'Oreal head to the war. King Orgio of Marden also comes out. L'Oreal advises Prince Wine and tells him we should retreat, our forces can't last long. But the prince refuses and escapes into the mountains, executing his plan, and indeed manages to scatter the army and lure Orgio deep into the mountains. Ninim appears with a group of soldiers, and she stands before General Orgio and tells him surrender and raise your sword. Orgio refuses to surrender and says he would never surrender to a woman. In the blink of an eye, Ninim cuts off his head and orders the soldiers to raise his head on a spear, and she warns the soldiers that no one should know anything about what happened. The soldiers raise General Orgio's head, and thus they win the battle. Prince Wine, the ministers, and Ninim gather and discuss what to do in Marden and how they can use it to their advantage. The prince says there are strategic locations we can use from the eastern region like a gold mine. The ministers are surprised by the prince's intelligence and say indeed we must exploit the gold mine, and that was our plan we were studying for a while. He explains to them the plan to attack the gold mine, but it's an initial plan not confirmed yet. The ministers agree with his opinion. At night, Ninim sits with Wine alone and tells him invading Marden is a closed deal, we need to think about what's next. He says if our army hadn't won he would have cancelled the plan. She asks him what to do now. He answers he can't think right now at all and needs to rest. Ninim insists that he decides now because there's no time. He gets angry and replies we must confirm the information about the mine so we can seize the mine easily before Marden's forces secure it, because they won't give it up easily. Ninim tells him words are easy but actions are hard. He says the situation has become mandatory, we must control the gold mine, there's no other choice. And on the next day, Prince Wine is in his office talking with Ninim and tells her, I am going to enter another battle with Marden so I can take control of the gold mine. Their talk gets cut by Commander Larkaram, who says, the man you asked for is outside, Your Highness. So the prince allows him to enter. The prince asks him, are you the one in charge of the mine workers, Durant? He replies yes, and this file has all the information you might need, Your Highness. The prince says, we'll see, and opens the file and gets shocked by the information. He asks him, are you sure about this information? He replies replies yes, but unfortunately the mine is empty. At the same time, Fuxtory, king of Marden, is sitting on his throne discussing with the ministers. He says angrily, how can a kingdom like Natra steal the gold mine? The finance minister Halonii replies and says we must answer this insult immediately. We lost the Bolta land with the mine, but we are ready to take it back again. And because of that, I think this is the role of General Drod, and we send with him 30,000 soldiers to wipe out Natra completely. The foreign minister Medon objects and says if this number of soldiers leaves our borders will be exposed and we will be open to any attack easily. Halonii replies we will take the mine before they gather their armies, and I expect the matter will not take more than a week. On the other side, Prince Wine is sitting at his desk and Ninum comes in and notices he is upset. She tells him, despair is useless, think again and don't give up. Wine replies, yesterday we defeated Marden and I managed to take the mine and in the end it turned out worthless. And you want me not to be upset? She tells him, you must think of a solution and think of your old policy. Wine says with despair, policy, we must withdraw, that is the best solution. Ninum asks him, will we withdraw this easily? Wine tells her, no, we can't abandon the mine so quickly, that might destroy the kingdom's name. Wine suddenly stands up because an idea came to him and says we can bargain with Marden and make them buy their own mine, and as Thurint said, the person responsible for the mine is Halonii, and he doesn't know the mine is empty, meaning no one in Marden knows either. Ninum tells him then we must prepare quickly and take all our precautions. Wine says, I am sure they will probably attack us with very great force. And on the next day Minister Laurel says to the prince, Marden's army is 30,000 soldiers while Natra's army is only 5,000. And as you expected, your highness, they are threatening us with huge military power. We must withdraw quickly, and if we don't withdraw then we are allowing them to take the mine. Wine says if we can hold on and force them to retreat then we keep the kingdom's honor and Marden will know that regaining the mine will be very hard, and this will be our chance for a peace agreement between us and Marden. At the same time, General Drod is standing and looking at Natra's army with surprise and says, do they really want to stand against all our forces? Commander Angrel replies, this is a very stupid decision. The general says, I doubt they are stupid. On the contrary, they think exactly like us and we must be careful. I am not ready to fall into any trap like Orgio did. The commander says, your skill cannot be compared to Orgio's skill. And Prince Wine is in a meeting explaining his plan. He says everything will end today after a whole month of effort. The army really moves according to the prince's orders and the battle begins. At the same time, General Drod gets angry and says how could Natra's army advance so fast? On the other side, Princess Flania is sitting with the royal teacher Gladius, and he asks her what is the easiest way to reach the goal. She replies, the mountains. The teacher says correct because the roads in the mountains are narrow and impossible to gather 30,000 soldiers there. So it is easy for 5,000 soldiers to defeat 30,000 at once. Flania asks him, can they attack the gold mine from the back road? He replies yes, and because of that Prince Wine decided to distract them at the back mountain. The princess asks him, can they use a new road? The teacher says there are 3 roads leading to Natra. The princess says surely Marden's army hesitates to use a new road and wants to take the mine by force, and that is easier for their huge number. The teacher smiles and says correct. And the 3rd day of the battle begins and General Drod angrily says to the ministers, how can you not control that mountain despite their small number? His speech gets cut by a soldier bringing an important report and telling him, we discovered an old mine leading to Natra's camp. The general laughs cunningly and orders the commander to move with the soldiers and attack Natra's camp. They move and the mine collapses on them and a large number of soldiers and Angrel die. It was a trap from Prince Wine. The prince stands confidently and says, checkmate. Ninum gets shocked and tells him, are you trying to break General Drod's morale? Was this your plan? The prince says, I can never defeat an army of 30,000 with only 5,000 soldiers, but I can defeat the leader who controls them. And General Drod gets furious and says, how dare he mock me and trick me? The minister says the loss of Angrel is very big. The general says, rejoice a little, people of Natra, before the battle ends. And on the 4th day, Natra's forces manage to reach Marden's fortress and set fire to all the camps. The general is shocked and the minister informs him, Natra's forces set fire to all the camps. The general angrily asks, how many are they? The minister says approximately 100. He gets angrier and asks, where are they now? The minister replies, we cannot determine their location. The ground starts shaking and the general says, could they be attacking us with their entire armies? He orders the minister to gather all the nearby forces and form a defensive line at the kingdom's headquarters. After 2 weeks, Prince Wine is sitting and happy and says now everything is going as I planned. Ninum informs him that the supplies are decreasing. Thanks to the battles we succeeded in, they greatly affected the soldiers' morale and Marden's forces became weaker. She asks him, do you think they might retreat? The prince says, impossible because their loss is unacceptable and in just 2 weeks all the siege will end. Ninum says, I hope so. I am tired of the view of this mountain and this place. Their talk gets cut by the entrance of the commander informing them about a delegation from Marden's army. Logan, the commander of Marden's army, enters and says to the prince, I speak on behalf of General Draud, your highness Wine. How dare your soldiers attack the general? A soldier gets angry and draws his weapon, but Prince Wine signals him not to interfere. The prince says, I asked you why are you here? Surely you did not come all this way just to provoke us. Logan replies, I am here to offer a peace agreement and I hope you allow me to explain all our conditions. First you must withdraw from the mine and surrender your weapons and release the country's residents. After that we will demand compensation for your unjust occupation of us. So what do you think, your highness? The prince refuses and says, you said you speak on behalf of Draud, right? Logan replies yes, but asks why. The prince says, not important to know, but tell the general I wish him good luck. After 3 weeks, the general stands and says to the ministers we must attack them before sunset, and he signals them to attack. A message reaches the general from Logan, and it is his head. A soldier from Natra attacks him, and he gets surprised by the second soldier who turns out to be Prince Wine. The prince says confidently, I do not think we have met before, General Draud. The general asks, what are you doing here? The prince says with confidence, I am here to take your head. The general tries to call for anyone, but Prince Wine tells him all your soldiers are busy fighting. The prince says, remember the mine tunnel. The general asks, you mean the death trap? The prince replies, yes, that one. I made the mine workers dig a parallel tunnel connecting the mine with the cave. And that tunnel was just a trap to make you forget the cave. The general says angrily, you were playing me all this time. Suddenly the general tries to attack the prince with the sword, but in the blink of an eye Prince Wine kills him. Prince Wine sits in the palace and they celebrate their victory. He listens to the soldiers talking about his bravery and smiles. Ninum asks him to talk in private. He goes out with her and says, what do you want? She replies, I received news that there is a spy from Marden and that Marden's capital was taken over. He asks her in shock, who did this? She replies, a country next to them called Cavern. He says, I should have accepted the peace negotiation with Marden. She replies, yes, but they were defeated easily. He says sadly, I don't even have time to sell the mine. Ninum says, I have a report about discovering a new gold vein, and she continues telling him this can move them away from the danger area. He says, I did not know how I would tell the army that the mine is empty, but finally I managed to survive at the last moment, and he moves happily and says finally I will take a vacation. She cuts his talk and tells him, but the western country's ministers want to meet you, and also Princess Flania wants to spend some time with you, and she laughs and tells him there are still so many things. He says loudly, I want to sell this kingdom and disappear. After that, Prince Wine goes to his office and sits remembering the academy days when he and his friends gathered for lunch after they succeeded in seizing the smuggled goods. Wine was very happy that they escaped, so Ninum told him, I don't know without Loa who secured the way for us how we would have escaped. Wine says to Loa, I hope you stop these things when you graduate because their end is bad. Loa says, I will remember your advice, but I don't think I will change. And I hope you don't change, and I will come to see you at the right time. Wine wakes up to Ninum's voice asking him, are you awake? Wine says, I had a strange dream. I remembered memories and our classmates in the military academy. She asks him, do you think what they are doing now? He replies, surely the same as they used to do before. He asks her, by the way, must I keep wearing this outfit? It's very tight. She replies, don't act like a child. You must wear an elegant suit to receive the Imperial princess. He says, she is the one who must care about her look and appearance. Wine asks, 3 princes competing for the throne. Why should I care about what is happening? She replies, if we meet one of the 3 princes we can lure him and know his intentions, but strange why the princess is here. Their talk gets cut by the news of the princess arriving earlier than expected. Wine, Ninum, and Flania move to welcome the princess of the Orthwood Empire, whose name is Lowelmina. He enters and says with full welcome, welcome your highness princess. I am Wine, Prince of Natra. I came to receive you instead of the king because he is sick. The commander of Orthwood replies, thank you your highness prince for welcoming us despite our sudden visit. The commander starts introducing the princess to Prince Wine and says, we are here to offer the princess's hand in marriage to you. Everyone standing gets shocked. Princess Loa tries to control their shock and says, I am the second princess of the Orthwood Empire, and lifts the cover from her face. Prince Wine and Ninum get surprised when they see her face because she is Loa, their friend from the academy days. Princess Loa continues talking and says, a long time has passed since I last saw you. They agree to continue their talk after Princess Loa rests from the travel. level. Prince Wine goes to his office and is angry and says, "Marriage? Surely this is a trap, I must be dreaming." Ninum replies, "No, not a dream." He gets angrier and says, "I didn't expect Loa to be the princess." She replies, "Well, why did she say back in the academy that she was just an ordinary person from the empire?" Ninum says, "She did the same as you did, meaning you two are alike." She tries to tease him and says, "Honestly, you two suit each other." Wine gets mad and says, "Stop joking," and asks her, "Do you remember that Loa and I were very strong?" She says, "Of course, how can I forget? We managed to return the smuggled goods and chase the thieves." He says, "All of that was Loa's thinking and planning." She says, "And you were sharing everything with her." He replies, "Loa is very smart. Impossible she came here just to marry. Surely she is planning something." At lunch, they all gather at the royal table. Princess Loa says, "I didn't expect to eat all this food in nature." The prince replies, "Of course, after a long travel you must eat well." The princess thanks him and Wine tries to draw her out and opens a conversation with her, saying, "About the marriage offer you proposed to me. Honestly, I am just an ordinary person. May I know what is special about me?" The princess replies, "You took the responsibility of the country instead of the king and won in the Marden War until your name reached our empire's borders. And my brothers tried to stop me from coming here, but this is my own choice. And because of that I brought army officers to protect me, not just soldiers." The prince thinks to himself and wonders how her brothers tried to stop her from coming, and yet she has all these guards, and he feels the whole matter is a trap arranged for him. Loa cuts his thoughts and says, "The winter here turned out very cold, unlike my expectations." The prince replies, "We will get you traditional nature clothes, don't worry." Loa thanks him for his care. Loa goes to her room and the servants enter with 2 big boxes, then leave. Princess Loa stands in front of the boxes and says, "Come out." Prince Wine comes out of one box and Ninum comes out of the other. Princess Loa tells Ninum, "I am happy to see you again." Ninum says, "I am also happy to see you, your highness princess." Princess Loa moves and holds Ninum's hand and says, "Call me Loa without formality like before." Ninum replies, "Okay, as long as we are in private." Loa says, "You two haven't changed." The prince replies confidently, "No, I have changed, of course, for the better." Their talk gets cut by Ambassador Brandel, who is requested by Princess Loa that if anyone comes asking about her to tell them she is sleeping. They gather and Wine asks her, "You didn't know I am a prince, right?" She says, "I asked Ninum and she said you are ordinary people." Loa asks Ninum, "Why did you lie to me?" Ninum replies, "I was protecting Prince Wine's secret." Loa forgives her. Wine says to her, "May I know what your goal is from this marriage?" Loa replies, "What do you think about seizing the empire with me?" He says, "You want me to remove 3 princes and make you empress?" She replies with full confidence, "Yes." Wine gets angry and says, "Mind your limits." Loa replies and says, "My brothers are fighting for the throne, and to calm all this chaos I must take the throne." Wine gets convinced and agrees to help her. Ninum walks with Wine in the palace and tells him, "I feel everything Loa said is a lie." He says, "I know, because Loa never asked for anything that easily." She replies, "So the marriage request is a trick and the help is also a trap." Wine says, "I noticed the spread of weapons that entered Natra." She asks with surprise, "What is the relation of the weapons to Loa?" He says, "Just a suspicion." Ninum goes to sit with Princess Flania in the garden and tells her, "I am very worried after my father's sickness, and Wine took the throne, and now Loa asked to marry Wine, and I started feeling alone." Ninum tells her, "The kingdom went through many changes," and tries to comfort her and says, "I am beside you, don't worry. And about Prince Wine, he loves you very much, and even if he marries he will still love you and not leave you." Flania says, "Thank you for comforting me." And Flania says, "What do you think about marrying Wine? I think you two suit each other." Ninum says, "I will remain loyal to Prince Wine my whole life." At the same time, Prince Wine sits with his sister Flania and helps her study history and suggests their lesson be about Intgadel, and explains to her that it was an independent kingdom called Cavern until it joined the empire and became named Intgadel. The commander interrupts him and enters telling him, "We seized some suspicious weapons not made here in Natra." Wine gets upset and says, "I want to send a message immediately." When the commander leaves, Wine says, "You did it, Lowelmina." On the next day, Prince Wine is sitting with Princess Loa and asks her, "Will you return to your country soon?" She replies, "Of course, but the only thing I regret is that I could not make you help me seize the throne." He laughs sarcastically and tells her, "You believed yourself. I am sure you are planning something else." She replies, "No, that is just illusions. I came to see old friends only." He replies, still insisting, "You deny. I am sure there will be a rebellion among the alliance countries that the empire occupied, and you came here to stop that." She asks him, surprised, "What made you think that?" He says, "I saw your weapons here in Natra, and it was clear they were made in the West. and Natra for you was just a crossing point to use nothing more. But the small store you made is in your country for when war happens. She tells him, the weapons made in the Empire are the best weapons, but surely they will run out if my brothers fight over them. So don't you think it's normal I bring other weapons from the West instead? He brings her a record of the weapons he found and says surprised, but these were distributed equally. And I want to tell you, you can hide a small number of weapons easily but not this huge number. And after I looked into the records of the Empire's arms dealers, I knew the weapons were equally distributed among your 3 brothers. Surely that is to prolong the conflict between them, and probably that is to leave room for rebellion to spread in the Empire, and all of this was your plan behind the scenes to take the rule yourself. She asks him, if that's true, shouldn't I have warned my brothers about the rebellion and tricked them? He replies with full confidence, but you did that and they all ignored you. Loa gets surprised and Wine continues, of course, because you are a young girl and have no political influence, so you realized you couldn't rely on your brothers. So you bet on one rebel faction moving and you would get evidence to give your brothers so they believe you, and you paved the way for all this in Natra and Garen because the 2 countries are next to each other and because that is the place where the Marquis of Inkgadel is. Loa smiles and says, you have always been smart and I am no match for you. And she admits everything he said is true. She tells him, indeed I got the chance to execute my plan, but I couldn't convince my brothers. And because I couldn't do it alone, I said I would use myself as bait and claim the Imperial throne. He replies, because if the rebellion succeeds, the princes will die and whoever wins and kidnaps you will demand wealth and the throne or create a new empire, right? She says yes, and after thinking which rebel could take that bait, I chose the Marquis of Inkgadel because he betrayed the alliance and joined the Empire before. So surely he would want support, and then I would be a very good tool for him to play with. And I thought it would be easy for him to kidnap me if I came here. Wine asks her sarcastically, you thought Inkgadel and Natra would fall for your plan. What if I told you I would hand you over to him? She replies with full confidence, surely you won't do that because of Ninum. If you hand me over and the rebellion wins, the West will become stronger, and then Natra will be between 2 fires, because the West, unlike the East, will treat you as slaves and you would never side with them. After that she tells him, now I have nothing to hide, and I expect the Marquis of Inkgadel will attack Natra soon to take me, and I wanted you to stop him to save the Empire, and surely I disappointed you after I said we are friends, and in truth I came to use you for the Empire. He replies, on the contrary, this is the Loa I know well. But you think the Inkgadel army can really invade Natra? Loa gets surprised and asks, you expected that? He replies, no, impossible, but I sent a small message to the Marquis saying that a noble visited Natra and will move to Inkgadel once he leaves. She asks surprised, when did you do that? He says, naturally he would invade Natra because you are here, but if I go to him without any effort he won't need to attack us. So sorry, you will need another way to stop the rebellion because I won't interfere. Loa tries to keep calm and tells him, but you wouldn't be surprised if Ninum opens that door now and announces the invasion of Natra. He replies with full confidence, impossible that would happen, and at that moment Ninum actually opens the door and tells him there is important news. Wine goes out and finds Grynal's brother from Inkgadel, who introduces himself, I am Gerard Inkgadel, and very happy to see you, your highness prince. Wine welcomes him and says, I am pleased with this visit, and asks him, may I know the reason for this sudden visit? Gerard says, I came because of my future wife Princess Lolmina, and asks, is she really here or are you mocking me? Wine tries to calm him and says, surely the princess needs to prepare first before she sees you, and I have prepared a special room for you to rest, and at night we will meet for dinner. Gerard calms down and goes to his room to rest. Wine goes up to his office very angry because Gerard came here, and finds Ninum standing, and she tells him, the way he looked at you I didn't like, and everything happening I don't like. Wine says, you are right, but thinking angrily ruins everything, try to think calmly. She says, I thought your message would reach them late, but it's good they didn't attack us. Wine replies, I didn't expect Greenwich to decide this fast. Ninum asks him, Loa is trying to put Natra against Inkgadel, right? Do you think she will try to ruin tonight's dinner? Wine reassures her that she won't do that, and that she will use Gerard and make him tell her about the rebellion. Ninum gets surprised she could go that far to achieve her goal. Wine continues and says, this is still not everything. There is a possibility she thinks Natra is on her side, and because of that she is serious about wanting to be empress. Ninum asks surprised, you mean she doesn't want to save the empire like she said? Wine replies, it's true she wants to stop the rebellion, but at the same time she wants to achieve her dream and rule the empire. Ninum says, but even if she makes Natra on her side, what will she do in the succession battle? Wine says, we don't even have enough power to intervene, but all she can do is say Natra Natra supports me. Ninum gets surprised and says, but Inkgadel no longer has a reason to invade Natra or fight it. No matter if they take Loa, it's over. Wine says, correct, and because of that Loa is trying to reverse the matter and make Gerard stop his father's rebellion. On the other side, Brandel asks Loa with surprise, do you really want to make Gerard stop his father's rebellion? Loa replies with full confidence, yes, and what will happen is the following. First, Gerard will discover his father's conspiracy while he is in a neighboring kingdom. Then he will tell the Imperial princess about the conspiracy after they become close to each other. And once the princess knows, she will help Gerard eliminate the rebels. Brandel says to her with surprise, but our forces and Gerard's followers are few. Loa replies, yes, and because of that we will borrow Natra's forces. At the same time, Wine continues talking and tells Ninum, surely she is thinking of borrowing our army. But all this is nonsense and impossible to happen. I will never let our army get involved in this succession war. So all I will do now is support Loa in manipulating Gerard, but without giving her any soldier. Loa continues talking to Brandel, but maybe Wine is thinking of something else. Surely he thinks Gerard will really become my husband and wants to benefit from him, but I will surprise him and make him give me his forces. At dinner they all gather. Wine says to Loa, by the way, if you marry Gerard it will be very important for the Empire, so I think you should announce your engagement suddenly, and he says to himself, go ahead, make a team with Gerard and crush the rebellion. Loa says to him, in that case you must come with us to the Empire because you are the reason that brought us together, and she says to herself, I want everyone to see that I have support from Natra. Gerard feels from the way they talk that they know each other from before. Wine replies, yes indeed, we met while we were studying outside the Empire. Gerard asks him curiously, and how was your life in the Empire? Wine replies, I spent all my time in dueling. Gerard gets impressed and says, me too, and asks him to show their skills in front of Loa. Everyone gets surprised and cannot believe it. Indeed, the sword duel begins between them, and Wine moves his sword toward Gerard, planning to just spar a little so as not to embarrass him and end the match in a draw, and Ninum is very angry because Gerard thinks he can defeat Wine. Suddenly Gerard stumbles and Wine accidentally strikes his sword and knocks it from his hand and wins. Everyone claps, so Wine throws his sword so they think it's a draw, but suddenly Gerard grabs the sword angrily and rushes at Wine, and Wine fears they will think he cheated, so he ducks to the ground to avoid the strike, but strangely Gerard cannot stop himself and breaks the window glass and falls from the balcony. Ninum moves quickly and checks his condition and tells them unfortunately he is dead. His father the king learns that he died in Natra's palace, and the commander gives him Gerard's sword and tells him the rest of the entourage who were with him got captured and one person survived and came to inform us. The king asks, where is the one who came to inform you? The commander replies, he was very tired, so we let him rest. The king orders him to know everything once he wakes up. And the one sleeping in the bed is actually Ninum. The king sits thinking to himself, how did he die, accident or illness? Or could it be deliberate murder because of their hostility with Natra? And he says to himself, now we have a reason to attack, and realizes the message Wine sent in his name had a warning about Loa's plan, which means the princess also participated in this assassination, and he thinks she has started the rebellion too against the Empire. At night Brandel says to Loa, I know the whole plan to save the throne, but your presence here in Natra became dangerous. Loa is happy that someone cares for her. Brandel says to her, be careful, time is passing. Loa replies, I know you are right, and that staying here is dangerous, but my life is not important compared to achieving what I came for because I am a princess of the Empire loyal to her people. Ninum is sitting with Wine and he says to her, if the news of Gerard's death spreads, surely they will say he was assassinated. Ninum says, of course. Wine gets very angry and says, he challenged me to a duel and died so stupidly. He continues seriously, this will mean war with Inkgadel, and my goal was to get Gerard closer to Loa and make them leave here. Ninum tries to calm him and says, we should get ahead of him before he does anything. Their talk gets cut by Loa and Brandel entering suddenly, and Loa says briefly, I surrender. I gave up the idea of using what is happening to reach the throne. From now on I will focus only on stopping the rebellion, so I came to ask you to help me in this. Wine agrees and says to her, Inkgadel's entire soldiers are 4,000. Loa says, I know they use weapons from the west. Wine replies, but they have only weak leaders. Loa says, yes, and I know they don't have enough horses and will rely on ground fighting. And she asks surprised, will you really help me? Wine says, I am not crazy to face a huge army with my 500 soldiers only, and because of that I will help you and avoid war. And the solution here is that we make Grinnick confess the rebellion. Prince Wine decides to go to King Granahi to explain the reason for Gerard's death. The king gets furious and orders his soldiers to attack Wine and his men. Wine says, I am here for another reason, not fighting. Grenache says angrily, my son died because of you, Wine. Prince Wine says, we must sit and talk. The king sits with Prince Wine and says, I will get straight to the point. I know you are involved in the rebellion conspiracy. Grenache gets shocked and Wine continues talking. If you want to kill me, here I am in front of you, and in the end justice will take its course. Grenache says angrily, you came to threaten me in my own kingdom. Wine replies, no need for any worry. The source of this evil is dead now, and the biggest damage will be on you because Gerard's reputation is bad in the whole empire, and everyone will believe he was the cause of everything and fell into Princess Loelmina's trap. And the last thing is that you will be accused of treason. But if you help me and present all the documents and evidence that prove the rebellion conspiracy and that you were involved in it, then the princess will lessen your punishment. She is waiting now in Natra, and my advice is ignore your pride and beg her. And don't forget that there are prisoners from Inkgadel with us and their fate is in your hand. The king surrenders and says, I will prepare myself and go to Princess Loelmina, but I need some time. Wine extends his hand to the king and says, don't worry, you are safe. Wine goes out with his soldiers to see where they will stay while the king prepares. But Wine notices the town is strangely quiet and no one is around them. The soldiers' commander says to Wine, surely they are watching us and will surround us. And indeed the king's soldiers appear and surround them. On the other side, King Grenache orders his soldiers to gather the forces and tells them get ready because we will capture the prince and take Princess Loa prisoner. At the same time Wine says to the commander, they knew the road we would take so they emptied the place. Surely these are not King Grenache's soldiers. And Wine thinks this is a trap from someone else. Suddenly he feels something coming from behind and dodges it. It is an attack by a man with a spear. Wine says, you are the ones who involved the Marquis of Inkgadel in the rebellion conspiracy. Surely you won't confess, but I will guess. You and your followers are soldiers from the west, right? The soldier gets angry and attacks Wine again. Wine says, I know making Grenache fall into your conspiracy was hard, but you miscalculated because your situation now is very bad. And that is clear from your anger. And I am sure there are still some of you in the town hiding somewhere aiming to assassinate Grenache and burn his palace so all the evidence disappears. The enemy gets tense and says to himself, this man seems to have been watching us the whole time and because of that expects all our moves. But he tries to calm himself thinking surely Wine doesn't know his men are in the palace now. Wine shocks him and asks, you think all my men are here with me? At the same time Western spies try to open King Grenache's room door. Suddenly Nanaki appears behind them and says, this is a forbidden room. One of them pulls his dagger and rushes at her. She dodges and knocks him unconscious. The other attacks her and she easily avoids his strikes. And she remembers when Wine told her, take Gerard's dagger and go as if you are one of his followers and inform them of his death and wait there to stop Grenache's assassination. She takes the dagger from the spy and kills him with it. On the other side, the leader of the spies gets angry at Wine for ruining his plan, so Wine asks him, do you have time to continue this fight? The leader decides to kill him quickly and go to the palace to kill Grenache himself. Wine replies, I expected you want to do that, and he rushes at him quickly with the sword, and with his other hand pulls a small dagger and throws it at him. The leader gets distracted and dodges the dagger, and quickly Wine cuts his arm with the sword. The leader asks angrily while in pain, since when do members of the royal family use hidden weapons? Wine replies, honestly I love trick methods because they are fast, and he asks angrily, want to continue? The leader orders his followers to retreat, and Wine orders his soldiers to let them go. Wine hears the sound of horses coming toward him, so he says to the commander, it seems Grenache broke the agreement. And he tells his soldiers, I think we must escape now. At the same time Grenache and his soldiers are coming fast and see Wine and his men from afar, so they increase speed to catch them, but suddenly they find themselves in front of a huge army. We go back in time and see Wine explaining to Ninim and Loa that he will try to negotiate with Grenache, and if it fails then he will escape quickly, but impossible to reach Natra safely, and because of that he decided to place his forces on the road and the advantage will be his because Grenache will come with few soldiers, since he thinks Natra's soldiers with Wine are few, and in the end he will be surprised that an army is waiting for him, and Wine says to them, but don't celebrate yet, the plan is not finished. I still have another surprise for him. We return to the present and Grenache stands not believing what he sees, and suddenly hears the sound of other soldiers coming from behind him. He asks his soldiers whose banner are they carrying? One soldier looks and says, it's the Empire's banner, so Grenache feels relieved and says, we are saved, but the soldier cuts his joy and says, but it's Princess Loa's banner. Grenache gets shocked, and the soldiers arrive and ask ask him to go meet the princess immediately. At the same time, Loa is coming in her carriage with her soldiers, and Granahí enters her tent and kneels, very terrified and thinking how he reached the stage and how to get out of it. Then he looks forward and gets shocked seeing Prince Wine standing beside the princess. He stands up angrily and loudly asks her for an explanation, but the princess's guard yells at him for speaking rudely. Princess Loa asks Granahí, what do you want to ask? He asks her, why is the Prince of Nature here in the Empire's land and also his soldiers outside? Wine's guard replies, how do you not know what happened? Of course the Prince of Nature is here because he will do a joint military maneuver with us. Granahí gets shocked and realizes Wine planned all this from the beginning since his visit. He loses control and falls. Wine supports him and says sarcastically, you don't look well. Granahí realizes that whatever he does he will not win, and the princess approaches him and asks, what will you do? He begs her to let him live and serve her. After that, Loa sits with Ninim and says, thank you for helping me. Ninim asks her, why did you cancel your marriage to Wine? Loa says, because the Empire needs me. Ninim replies, but you love him. Loa gets nervous and says, actually I love him as just a friend. Ninim says, it was so clear you loved him since the academy days. Loa says, fine, I will admit I really had feelings for Wine, but since the marriage plan failed, it's over. Loa meets Prince Wine and tells him, now we have the proof of the conspiracy and we can kidnap Granahí's son and torture him until he confesses. Wine replies, I also thought of that because if I can make him weak then it's easy for you to control him. Loa gets surprised and says, you did that for me? Wine says, I promised you if you get into trouble and can't escape I will help you, and now my role is over, and he leaves. The next day Prince Wine and Ninim are on their way to Cavern. Ninim says, I really don't want to go. He replies, I know this trip to the festival will cause a lot of trouble, that is if we even reach Cavern safely, because we will meet the remnants of Marden's army at the border. Then he says to her, honestly I was surprised by your hair color. It looks natural and not dyed. Ninim asks him, is white or black better? He replies, I feel it's a trap and any answer I say will be used against me. She replies, if you don't answer it will still be used against you. He quickly says, white. She replies sadly, I thought you would like black. He says, that's what I was afraid of. At the same time Princess Flania says to Claudius, you are from the west, right? Can you tell me about the Spirit Festival? He replies, it's a festival held every spring to celebrate the day the demon who tortured humans for years was defeated. She says, so they invited Wine to fix the relationship between Natura and Cavern. On the other side, Ninim gives advice to Wine and says, you must keep calm because of cultural differences. He replies, I am not that stupid. The commander interrupts and says, we will reach the gold mine soon. Wine replies happily, finally. At night at dinner, Wine says to the miner Thurant, strange how all the buildings damaged by the war got rebuilt so fast. The worker Thurant replies, yes, your highness the prince, we managed to extract a large amount of gold because we pressured ourselves at work. And now we are searching for new resources. Wine gets very happy. The commander says, if Hegel were here, he could have managed the mine carefully, but his retirement was unexpected. Ninim asks, what did you do with General Hegel? Wine says, surely enjoying farming now. Ninim gets surprised. In another place, a group of men appear and their leader says, is it true Prince Wine will attend the Spirit Festival? The follower replies, yes, this is confirmed information. He says, this is our chance to form an army. They agree on an attack plan. The next day, a group of bandits move behind Prince Wine's convoy. The commander tries to warn the prince and distract the enemy. Ninim bravely takes control of the carriage and says, disguised soldiers as bandits. Wine replies with full confidence, surely from Cavern or Marden. Suddenly the carriage will breaks. A group of Marden soldiers appear and attack the bandits and they retreat. The prince says to them, I am Prince Wine of Natura and I want to meet Prince Helot. Prince Wine really goes to Prince Helot's palace. A girl appears and says to the prince, I am Zeno and I speak on behalf of Prince Helot because he is sick. Prince Wine gets surprised and says, sick? She replies, yes, he was captured by the Caverinians when our capital fell. She asks, may I know the reason for your visit today? He replies, I was on my way to Cavern to attend the Spirit Festival. Suddenly Zeno raises the sword in his face and says, do you realize what you just said? He replies, I am telling the truth and mean no insult. He asks her, what will you gain if you kill me? Will the alliance break? You know Cavern's power, right? 20,000 and Marden's army 2 or 3,000. He continues, maybe give me a chance to help you because I will continue my journey to Cavern and I will need your help. Zeno says, I must inform King Helot first. They move on their way to Cavern and Prince Wine says to Ninim, come look, this is Cavern's capital. It's my first time seeing it, very beautiful. Wine meets with Zeno and Commander Raklam and says, tomorrow I will meet the King of Cavern and take Raklam and part of the soldiers with me, and Ninim will be responsible for finding all the information that might help us, and says to Zeno, you are free to choose to come with me or with Ninim. She says, I would like to go with Ninim. The next day, Prince Wine and Commander Raklam are in Cavern's palace. They meet two commanders who ask, you are from Nature Kingdom? And continue sarcastically, you look strange for this place, and leave. Wine gets suspicious and says to Raklam, who are those? I feel they are the bandits who attacked us, especially since one of them is injured. Raklam says, could it be them? Wine replies, I am not sure. They meet the king of Cavern who welcomes them and says, I thank you so much for coming, your highness Prince Wine, and continues, I am the king of Cavern and I always wished to meet and talk with you, and now we finally meet. Please come to my office. Raklam asks, what do you think, your highness? Wine says quietly, no chance to refuse. At the same time, Zeno wants to attack Halonii and Ninim stops her, taking her to a place where no one can hear them. Zeno asks, what is this place? Ninim replies, it's a place no one knows except me, and I brought you here so no one hears us. And continues, the one you wanted to kill was a servant of Marden, and I know he betrayed you, and all of this for Cavern. Zeno gets angry and hits the table and says, if he hadn't betrayed Marden, none of this would have happened and my family would be with me. Ninim says, but killing him is not the solution and I won't let you do it. Zeno replies, fine, we will postpone killing him. The king of Cavern takes Prince Wine to his office and introduces him to Cavern's nobles and says, I present to you Prince Wine. Wine says to himself, why am I here anyway? King Ordalas says, these are all members of Levition here for the festival gathering. Caldmelia asks, why is the Prince of Nature here? Wine thinks to himself, they are also shocked by my presence just like me. Ordalas says, what do you think about Prince Wine joining you? Wine gets shocked. The meeting ends and Wine goes to his room very angry and says to Ninim, I can't continue in this mess. Ninim asks, okay, explain to me what happened? Wine says, they nominated me as a member of the Spirit Festival. She replies shocked, you are joking, right? Wine says, no, I am serious. She says, whoever joins them must be of Levisha's lineage or major disciples. Wine says, unfortunately Natra has a bloodline to Callias and he was one of Levisha's greatest disciples. She asks, what is the solution now? Wine says, all the major members from the Western countries, I must contact them and use this chance. Wine sits with Zeno and says, this is our only chance to contact many princes of different countries, and whether you kill them or forgive them is your choice. She says, I will defend Marden to my last breath. Wine says, first stop is Caldmelia and it's hard for women to be easily accepted there. Wine meets Caldmelia and says, how did you reach this position? You became better than Levitia or the greatest disciples and became the princess of the education office. She replies, yes, I understand your feeling and I accepted your presence with us, but I have one condition. Wine asks, what condition? She says, I know King Ordalas entered the war with Marden claiming to free its people, but that is not true. It's just an excuse and I will not accept your nomination if they are not freed. Wine says, but Natra took over Marden with Cavern. She replies, but there is still part of their army alive and that part challenges us and we must eliminate them to prevent any rebellion or war. Zeno hears all this and gets very angry. Caldmelia addresses Zeno and says, you can go rest. Zeno replies, thank you, don't worry, I am fine. Zeno and Wine leave. In another place, Ninim is watching Halonii, who is making a deal with Commander Louver to defeat Natra. And in another place, the miner is tied up and says, who are you? Ninim says to Wine, I could not reach all the information except that they are agreeing to defeat Natra. Wine replies, their goal is to attack us here, but it is good that I understood Lover's intentions. As for Ordalas, now I understand what he is planning. His goal is to seize Marden's gold mine, but unfortunately his plan failed and we defeated Marden and took the gold mine. That is why Prince Ordalas wants to get rid of me. Ninim tells him, you are putting yourself in danger by joining the elites. Zeno cuts their talk and says, sorry for interrupting, and says to Wine, I want you to help me with an important matter. Can I? He says, what do you want? She replies, I would like to attend King Ordalas's meeting. Wine says, you know well you cannot come with me and I will not allow you to assassinate King Ordalas. She replies, you misunderstood. Wine asks, then why do you want to come? She says, so that an alliance is formed between Marden and Natra. He replies, and why would I agree to this alliance? She says, I don't know, but there is still a chance before the gathering of the chosen. Wine replies, impossible for you to come with me. I do not trust you. Zeno says, you do not trust me? Please, I need one chance. He says, fine, you can come with me, but promise me you will not think of assassinating the king. Zeno says, I promise you. The next day in King Ordalas's palace, the king says, I wanted to meet you away from anyone. Halonii says, I was honored to meet you, your highness the prince. My name is Halonii. The king says, he is new in the country but one of the most competent officers and he worked in a special post. He continues, what did did you do, your highness, about the festival? Wine replies, they offered me some conditions before I join them. The king says, very good. Now the king's popularity is decreasing and the festival must be completed quickly. He continues, if I had a daughter I would have married her to you, your highness the prince. Wine asks, is Brandel the princess of Cavern? He replies, I killed my treacherous wife because she did not bear an heir worthy of the kingdom. He continues, I want to ask you a request, your highness the prince. Wine says, what request? And thinks to himself, surely he will talk about the gold mine. His thoughts are cut by the king's voice saying, I want some of the soldiers you train in Natra. Wine asks surprised, may I know why? The king replies, I will use them for hunting because I heard you have a very large number of soldiers, and asks, what do you think about joining the hunt? The prince attacks and with one move throws a spear at the soldier who entered. Laurel comes in and says, I will watch the road, and throws a sword to Wine. Wine says, all this will end in the blink of an eye. The king stands and says in pain, what do you mean by your words? Wine replies, I know it is a difficult decision, but everything will end now. The king backs away in fear and says, I am one of Lavisha's great disciples. Wine stabs the king with the sword and the king dies. Wine looks at Zeno and she says in shock, I cannot believe you killed him. He replies, never mind, what will we do with Halonii? You can kill him yourself if you want, and he extends his hand with the sword. Halonii says in fear, forgive me please. Wine says, impossible, you agreed with Louver to kill me. He replies, no, that did not happen, Louver threatened me, I had no other choice. Suddenly Zeno grabs the sword and kills Halonii. On their way Wine says, you can say that I killed them because of the disputes between us. Zeno says, I hope I earned your trust and made the right decision. Ninum replies, you scared me, how did you kill so easily? I cannot believe you did that. Wine says, the most important thing is to know the next step, what we will do. Ninum asks him, could they pursue us? He replies, surely, but before I left I set the palace on fire so we gain time and distract them and can move safely. They take a rest and Ninum asks Wine, what is the next step? He says to her, there must be an alliance between us and the Free Marden forces, and there is no longer a chance to escape. War will start between us and the Caverinians. Ninum says, we are exposing Natra to danger like this. Wine says, tired, I know. She asks him, did you decide to agree to the alliance before or after King Ordaliz's death? He says, before of course, I am not that reckless. Laurel cuts their talk and says, I hope you are well, your highness the prince. Wine says, I am fine. Did you reach any information? Royal says, we managed to reach his residence and knew that he was planning a conspiracy to depose Ordalesi and take his place. At the same time Louver tries to control the chaos and a soldier informs him and says, a rumor has spread that you are the reason for the king's death to seize the throne. So Louver gets very angry that his plan was exposed. Caldmelia says, now King Ordalez is dead and I have proof of treason. A message comes to Wine from the palace and Ninum reads it and says, there are rebels in Natra who closed the borders and are demanding your head. Laurel says to him, I have bad news, your highness the prince. A landslide blocked our way to reach. Wine asks, how long will it take so we can pass it? Laurel says, about 10 days. Wine says, we must move now, the rest is over, have everyone prepare so we move. He says to Ninum, inform Zeno that I need her quickly. She says, okay. At the same time Louver is chasing Wine. He says, have you reached the road they will use to reach Natra? He replies, yes, the main road. Louver asks, so they will not use the mountain pass, it is the shortest road to their border. Louver says, I am sure it is a trick to make us take the main road. They move through the mountain pass, and Louver is shocked by the army and says, could these be bandits? The rebels attack them from behind. Zeno says to Wine, you planned for Louver to arrive before us and for the attack to happen on him instead of you. Ninum says, this is a very old trick but clever. Wine says, I would not have succeeded without Marden's forces, and what must happen now is that we can cross Natra's border, and I am sure we will defeat them. Zeno says, but our number is small. They are shocked when General Hagel appears, and Ninum says, I thought he retired. Is it possible, your highness the prince, that you planned all this? He says to her, I did not imagine matters would reach this stage. Louver says to Hagel, I did not expect to see you one day. I always heard about you, Hagel. In the blink of an eye Hagel cuts Louver's head and raises his sword. Wine is in his office and Ninum informs him that Prince of Marden Helmet is present and wants to meet him. Prince of Marden enters wearing a mask. Wine says, welcome King Helmet. The king removes the mask and they get shocked that it is Zeno. She says, I am the second princess of Marden. Happy to see you again. She continues, I want to ask you a request, your highness the prince. She says to him, our land Marden wants to join Natra and become subject to it because I am a woman and cannot manage everything alone, and no one will rule Marden justly except your highness. Wine agrees to her request. In Princess Loa's palace, she says to Mayor Cosimo, I made sure all invitations arrived. He says yes, and and the important guests have arrived, and that is proof the empire is still under our control. Loa asks, and our 3 guests arrived? He says yes. Loa says, I was wrong to give them the chance to destroy themselves and act without returning to me, but all that is over now and we will claim the throne legally. Brandel says to her, Nature's delegation has arrived. Loa says excitedly, I must welcome them. Brandel asks her, why welcome them yourself? It is just a small kingdom and someone may say you lower your rank to theirs. Loa replies, they are very important figures in the kingdom and I invited them to attend, and any welcome is to strengthen our ties with Natura, and the main reason is I want to see Prince Wine, and if he attends the celebration then our relation with Natura will be strong. Loa is shocked when she finds Flanina came instead of Prince Wine. Flanina says, thank you for inviting me, I am Flanina, I came instead of Prince Wine because he is very busy. At the same time Prince Wine is worried about Flanina and says, I am very worried, I hope Flanina is fine, I sent Ninim and Nanaki with her, I did not expect she would really go to Marden. He remembers when he was in the meeting and they said our kingdom was invited to attend the anniversary ceremony of the empire's founding, and the 3 princes and the princess will be there, and the heir to the empire will be announced. He wanted to know if his presence is important. A minister said there will be important figures, you must attend, your highness. Another minister cut him and said, but the kingdom could face danger in your absence. Wine thought to himself, surely if I attend Loa will try to trick me to be on her side and Flanina wants me to spend time with her. His thinking is cut by the prince's discussion. Flanina says, I will attend instead of you, your highness the prince, and Wine and all the ministers are shocked. Flanina really prepares with Nanaki and Ninim and they move. Ninim says, I will tell you some information. After the civil war everyone sympathized with Princess Loa Wilimina, and she decided to form a national faction to gain support, and she gained all the noble princes. And of course she is unlike her 3 brothers, and yet she is very strong and turns the table on everyone. She decided instead of military solution to appear as if she cares for the empire's interest, and this way she wins support. So anyone who tries to oppose her she shows him to. Everyone is evil. She turned out a big deceiver. At the party everyone is amazed by Flanina's beauty, and they ask about her, who she is and how is she so beautiful. Loa says to her, come, I will introduce you to my guests, and says, allow me a minute to introduce Princess Flanina, Princess of Natura. Manfred says, what a surprise, I heard a lot about you, your highness the princess, but I did not know you are this beautiful, let me introduce myself, I am Prince Manfred. She replies, I am honored to meet you, your highness the Prince Manfred. She remembers Wine's words when he said Manfred is the youngest brother and not easy at all. Bartolush says, I heard you came instead of Prince Wine. She remembers Wine's words when he said Bartolush's strength is in his army and he is the middle brother. She says, I am very sorry but Natura is at war so it was difficult for Prince Wine to come. Demetrio says, we thank you for your presence and traveling all this distance, but you despise our empire to send a young girl like you. She remembers Wine's words. Demetrio is the eldest brother and his only support is that he is arrogant and the model eldest son. Loa says, you cannot talk like this to Princess Flanina, right Manfred? Manfred says, I am glad to meet you, your highness the princess. May I speak with you privately? Ninim says, your highness the princess, if we stay here they will exploit us, we must leave. Flanina says, I am sorry your highness Prince Manfred because I promised Princess Loa we will talk a little. Loa says, yes indeed, let's go, Princess Flanina, and takes her and walks away. Loa says, so what will we do now? If you want to rest your room is ready. Flanina says, thank you, and Loa leaves. Ninim says, you were very good dealing with the princes. Flanina says, I want to rest. Ninim says, I will leave you and return quickly. She calls Nanaki and says, take care of Princess Flanina. Princess says to Nanaki, what is this? Nanaki replies, these are very delicious sweets, and Flanina moves to eat some. Ninim goes to meet Loa and Loa asks her, why were you looking at me like that? Ninim replies, I was joking with you. Loa asks, did you want something? Ninim replies shortly, because I do not want to leave Princess Flanina alone. Loa cuts her and says, so she is more important than me. Ninim says, yes, the princess is important of course. Loa gets upset so Ninim says, I was joking, can you tell me what you want? Loa says, I want to talk to you about the deal, I want Princess Flanina to offer Nature's support to me. Ninim says, and in return, Loa says, at the summit I have information about the empire's heirs. Ninim says, Prince Wine expected you would offer me a deal but his response was refusal. Loa gathers with the 3 princes and says, let's begin the summit, and we must discuss the future of our empire. At the same time, Princess Loa and Ninim are touring the city with the mayor, who says, this is the largest market here and it has all the food and economic goods. Ninim says, I cannot believe the mayor offered to take us himself on a tour in the city, but surely it is a trap to know information about Natura. They enter the merchants' council and Princess Flanina is shocked by the number of merchants and says, what is this place? The mayor says, this is the Citizens' Council, a place where all matters related to merchants are discussed, and general policies are discussed here. Flanina asks, so all these are common people? He replies, yes, and any decision discussed here is presented to the Empire's parliament. The princess says, so you help the people improve their lives and discuss all their problems, that's why they all care about the council. He replies, yes, and today's discussion is about building a water canal. Surely it is boring for you, your highness the princess. She says, no, I hope you allow me to sit and listen to them. He says, as you wish, your highness the princess. Somewhere else Manfred says, my brothers must know their place. How dare they claim the throne? And he breaks everything angrily. Princess Flanina sleeps and Nanaki says, it's the first time I see the princess this tired. Ninim says, because she was in the Citizens' Council. Ninim goes to Loa and a maid enters and informs Ninim that Prince Demetrio is coming. Ninim brings Flanina and Demetrio arrives and asks, what are you doing here, Princess Loa? Loa replies, I am here drinking tea with Her Highness Princess Flanina. Flanina asks, may I know the reason for your visit? He says, one reason, I have an offer for Natura. Flanina asks, what offer? He says, I want to marry you. Everyone is shocked and Flanina asks, what is the reason you ask to marry me? He says, the kingdom is in difficult circumstances and marriage will create an alliance between Natura and Marden. My goal is to strengthen ties and marriage is the solution. Flanina says, thank you very much for thinking about Natura. I will deliver your request and see my brother's response. He interrupts her and hits the table with his hand and says, I want an answer now because this marriage is in the Empire's interest and is not up for discussion. And since Prince Wine is not here, the decision is yours. He thinks that once he marries her, he will know how to torture her as he wants to take revenge on Wine. She says, I am sorry, I cannot make such a decision because I have no experience. He says, are you rejecting my proposal? I will make you regret it. They are shocked when Prince Wine enters and says, I am glad to see you, your highness Prince Demetrio. I am Crown Prince of Natura, Prince Wine. Princess Flanina says, you came for me? Wine replies, I finished work quickly so I decided to come to the party. Ninim writes a note and gives it to Wine without anyone noticing. Wine reads it and understands the situation. Prince Demetrio breaks the silence and says, I did not expect to see you, your highness the prince. And he addresses Flanina, your highness the princess. Now Prince Wine is here and I am sure you will not refuse his decision? Flanina replies, indeed I cannot refuse any decision of Prince Wine. Demetrio says, well, I want to know your thoughts about the union of Natura and Marden, or do you object? Wine replies, of course all support to you if this will strengthen the relationship of the Empire and Natura. He continues, I never imagined marriage could happen between two from Earthwold. He addresses Princess Loa Willimina and says, right, unexpected surprise, Princess Loa Willimina? Loa says, yes of course, my engagement to Prince Wine was postponed because of the war, but now the situation is better. I will marry Prince Wine and Demetrio will marry Flanina and the bond between the Empire and Natura will be very strong. Wine replies, my sister and I are looking forward to that day eagerly. Demetrio hits the table angrily and says, what is this nonsense? Loa, how do you make a decision like that alone without my knowledge? Loa says, as long as there is no heir to the throne yet, I am responsible for my actions and decisions and I told that to Prince Wine. Any objection? Demetrio stays silent. Ninim enters and says, Natura warns against any marriage between it and the royal family. Wine replies, I really forgot that decision, and this is a trick from Ninim and Wine understands it. Wine says to Demetrio, so what do you think, Prince? In my opinion, let's discuss this tomorrow. Demetrio replies, fine, I have no objection. Wine says, fine, see you tomorrow and shakes hands with Demetrio. Loa says, excuse me, I need to rest. Wine sits with Flanina and Ninim and Flanina hugs him and says, how did you appear suddenly? I am very happy. Wine replies, I was worried about you, but I was sure you would know how to handle things in my absence. I am very proud of you. Flanina asks, so what will you do with Demetrio? Wine replies, we are members of a royal family and there is no escape from political marriage and that's why we must choose our partners wisely. But I don't want to hand hand you to someone like him, and if he insists on marrying you first he must unite the continent. Flanina laughs and says, then impossible, he will marry me. Wine sits with Ninim and she asks, are you sure your presence here is the right decision? Wine replies, don't worry, nature is safe and I finished all the work I had, but I am worried about Levition's next move. She says, Levition? Wine replies, yes, I don't know what exactly she is planning. Wine feels dizzy. Ninim says, what's wrong? Are you okay? Wine replies, maybe I pushed myself and didn't rest these days. No need to worry. He asks her, any new news? She says, everything is under control and I was asked to deliver this to you. He asks, what is this? She says, a secret invitation from Loa wanting to see you. Wine really goes to the place and meets Loa and says, what do you want to talk to me about? She says, I have a complaint. Wine replies, a complaint? You surely want to know who will take the throne from your brothers? She replies, I don't care who will become emperor, but my goal is to use the empire's influence and strengthen our relations with all princes. Wine says, I don't think Manfred and Demetrio and Bartolush will reach that decision, but clearly you show disinterest in the throne. Loa says, can you encourage me so I can continue? Wine says, I am very distracted. She says, well, I want to hear your honest opinion about me. Wine says, I think you are stupid. Don't be upset by my words. I know you think about many things and I don't mind helping you. She says, we must return to our rooms before anyone notices our absence, and says, I will share my story and win. At the same time, Manfred says, is Prince Wine here? The commander replies, yes, apparently there will be an alliance between him and Prince Demetrio. Manfred says that prince is extraordinary and rules Natra in place of the king, so we must kill him as fast as possible. I will not let anyone stand in my way to the throne. On the next day, Wine prepares to meet Demetrio but falls while getting into the carriage, and Ninim says, are you okay? Wine replies, I just want to sleep. She says, if you feel tired, maybe rest. Wine replies, no, nothing. I must finish the meeting with Demetrio. He asks, I didn't see Flanina. Where is she? She says, she went to the Citizens' Council. In the Citizens' Council, the mayor says, we want to discuss tax rate issues. Nanaki says to Flanina, would you like to listen more? She says, yes. The mayor says to her, I thank you for your interest in the Citizens' Council. At first I thought you were mocking us, but I noticed your care and I hope you join us. Flanina replies happily, of course I agree. Prince Wine meets Demetrio and Demetrio says, I was waiting for you, your highness Prince Wine, and prepared this place specially for you. Wine thinks to himself, it's clear he is using the marriage plan with Flanina to carry out all his plans easily. The maid serves tea. Wine says to her, stop, did you make the tea? She replies, yes, your highness the prince. Wine says, drink it. She gets scared and says with fear, me? But this is the best kind of tea and reserved for important guests. Impossible someone like me drinks it. Wine cuts her and says, I said drink. Demetrio laughs and says, you think the tea has poison? And he takes the cup and says, I invited you to continue our talk and you accuse me with silly things, and he drinks. Wine tries to stop him and says, wait, but Demetrio drinks before. Demetrio says, I hope you believe, Prince Wine, there is no poison. Suddenly Demetrio falls and the maid runs away and Ninim tries to catch her. Wine says, Ninim, we need a doctor quickly. After a while, Wine sits with Ninim and says, I want to know everything that happened while I was held for questioning, and of course Prince Demetrio, we managed to save him, but he returned to his palace until he recovers. Bartolush and Manfred denied the assassination attempt and said it is a conspiracy from Miltars, and they besieged the city with their armies. And regarding Flanina and Loa, they tried to control the situation and I was detained because I was in the suspect list. Ninim asks, and what now? Wine replies, we must return to Natra. She says, impossible, of course. He says, we need to make a plan to escape. The commander bursts into the room and Wine says, how dare you enter my room without knocking? The commander says, I am sorry, but there is no time, your highness the prince. Wine asks, what is it? The commander says, news came that the army raised Levition's banner and they are on their way to Miltars from the west. Wine is shocked. Caldmilia says, Miltars will finally be freed from occupation, and now I can say the holy war will finally begin, and I hope Prince Wine will be happy. Wine is angry and says, I was planning to escape. I have no time for a new war. Ninim says to him, Wine, can you calm down? He replies, how do you want me to calm down? Now there is a siege from the army and also Levition's army. Ninim says, the population of Miltars is 30,000 and it is impossible for the guards to keep all of them safe. Wine continues instead of her and says, and that makes it hard to intervene and the war will begin. We must escape. We are putting ourselves in danger. Wine feels tired and Ninim asks him, are you okay? He says, I feel exhausted, and he faints. Wine is on the bed and clear signs of exhaustion show, and Ninim and Flanina are beside him. Flanina gets up and Ninim asks her, where are you going, your highness the princess? She says, the Citizens' Council. Ninim says, no, it's dangerous for you. Flanina says, I know, but this is my duty. In the Citizens' Council, council they are discussing what happened in the empire and the official says, "We must ask for Philoton's help." A citizen replies, "Clearly they are here to seize Miltars' wealth." The official says, "If we show weakness before them we will lose our right to rule," and they start hitting each other. Flanina enters the council and Nanaki says to her, "Be careful with your decisions, Your Highness the Princess." Flanina says, "Members of the council, the city is in danger and there is no way to escape the battle, but this is not the end of Miltars. Surely there is a solution, and you merchants of Miltars, the greatest trading city on the continent, the city has 30,000 people, you need to unite and cooperate and be one hand." Wine is still in bed and wakes up and says, "What happened?" Ninim is sleeping at the edge of the bed beside him. She wakes up at his voice and hugs him and says, "Wine, I am happy you woke up." He jokes, "I might faint again because of you now." She says sorry and cries and continues, "I don't know what would have happened to me if you hadn't woken up." He says, "Calm down and stop crying." Flanina enters and says, "Wine, I was very worried about you." He replies, "I am fine, don't worry." Flanina tells him about what happened in the Citizens' Council. All the people of Miltars move together to Levition and Flanina is the leader and Caldmilia is shocked. King Groir, king of Saljit, says to Caldmilia, "I am shocked, what will we do now? We are not ready to fight 30,000 people, we must retreat." She says to him, "King Groir, this is just a trap." Wine says to them, "I am glad to see you again, Caldmilia." Wine says, "Thanks to you we saved Miltars without any losses." Caldmilia says, "Helping the oppressed is our duty in Levitia and our duty is to save them from any injustice." King Groir asks, "So what is the situation now?" Wine replies, "That is a long story, but I know the mayor," and he asks them, "I have a question, your army defended us, but what is their position?" Caldmilia says, "They will be expelled and of course they will liberate the city." King Groir says, "Of course that was our plan." Wine says, "Thank you," and asks them to sell him the army. The king and Caldmilia are shocked. Wine says to them, "I know your army doesn't care about money and still Miltars is a trading city and currency is just a symbolic tradition and we will build a temple especially to honor your help to us." Caldmilia says, "You will give us money and fame in exchange for leaving you our army and returning to our kingdom?" King Groir says, "Agreed." Caldmilia gets angry because she was going to refuse and says to the king, "What did you say?" He says, "I said agreed." She says, "But I am the one responsible for this decision." He says, "And I am the one responsible for the army." Wine says to them, "Thank you for cooperating with Natra." The army moves and Lua says to Wine, "Do you think my brothers will attack the people?" He replies, "Impossible, they attack their own people and if they think to fight, the army will not be defeated." Bardlosh is shocked by the size of the army and says to the commander, "Inform Manfred immediately." Wine says to Lua, "Inform the princes there is an important meeting." She says, "Is this a trick?" He replies, "Yes, and this is just the first step." Manfred and Bardlosh are sitting with the mayor and Lua and Wine. Wine says, "Who do you think is behind this assassination attempt?" Manfred replies, "Are you accusing me and Bardlosh?" Wine says, "The city security is strict and special guards are placed in every complex so defeat is hard, but something is unclear and the traitor is not among us." Manfred says, "You mean King Dimetrio?" Wine says, "Yes, all this happened arranged by Prince Dimetrio." Bardlosh gets angry and says, "What nonsense is this? Why would he do that?" Wine replies, "His position in Miltars was weakened, and when your forces became weak he returned and attacked you and thus he can claim the throne." Lua says, "That's why he refused to discuss with us and continued demanding the throne." Wine smiles because his plan is going as expected. The mayor says, "Any dealings with Prince Dimetrio will be banned." Manfred and Bardlosh say they agree with your offer. Wine laughs and Ninim says, "Enough laughing." He says to her, "I'm happy the plan succeeded." She replies, "I didn't expect it to succeed and strengthen our economic relations this way." Wine says, "Now our budget will increase and the kingdom's value will rise." Ninim says, "Are you still thinking about selling the kingdom?" He says, "What are you saying? I would never sell the kingdom after achieving all this money." She replies, "I didn't expect this amount of profits we earned from Martin." He says, "That's all because of its trade location." She says, "You need to find a trade partner." Their talk is cut when there's a knock at the door. Wine allows entry and the commander says, "A delegation from the kingdom of Solgist has arrived." Wine says, "Bring them to the meeting room." Ninim asks, "Do you think King Groir wants something?" Wine smiles and says, "I have a great plan." Heifa says to Zeno, "This is an invitation for His Highness the Prince to attend a party in the kingdom of Solgist." She asks him what privileges can strengthen the state. He says, "You marry His Highness Prince Wine." She asks, "So if the marriage happens we guarantee protection for Martin under Natra's authority?" At the same time Prince Wine and Ninim are on their way to Solgist. Ninim says to Wine, "Are you really going to marry Zeno?" He says, "I want to stay single all my life." She asks, so what are you planning? He continues, the goal of our visit is to rebuild Marden and make it under nature's control, so the solution will probably end with marriage. They arrive at Solgist and Zeno welcomes them and says, welcome. Wine says to her, thank you for receiving us, your highness the princess. Zeno says, there's no need for formality between us. Wine says to her, I'll be glad if you accept my help in solving your problems. She says, the kingdom of Delonio sent a letter about trade goods. Wine says, and Marden also sent a letter. Zeno says, so you also got a letter? He replies, yes, a complaint about trade goods. He continues, don't worry about the letter, it might be a trap for you. In Prince Wine's room, Ninim says to him, I was sure she would ask you for marriage. He gets annoyed and says, she might propose tomorrow and I'm sure she'll hint at it during the city tour. On the next day, Wine meets Zeno. She says to him, I'm happy to see you. Wine is surprised she changed her clothes and asks, what exactly is your position? She replies, I have many roles. I run the kingdom and handle different affairs, and today I'll take your highness on a tour. They move and begin their tour and Wine is impressed by the statues. Wine says to her, by the way, you can join us if you decide independence. Zeno says, of course we hope our kingdom will be part of Natura, and that will be the best way for Marden to prosper. She says, let's take a break. Wine thinks, surely she will ask to marry me. Wine sits with Zeno. She says to him, what do you think of our city? He says, very beautiful, and today I understood why they rely on you in important matters. He continues, the relationship between the ruler and his people must be strong. She asks, then why don't you easily trust people? He says, Natura has 800,000 people and many watch my movements, so I must be careful and not trust anyone easily. The first minister Sergis of the kingdom of Solgist meets Princess Zeno and says, I apologize for the sudden visit. Zeno replies, no problem, Sir Sergis. May I know the reason for your visit? He answers, I am worried that the trade goods Marden exports to Delonio are occupied by another country. She says, occupied? I don't know what you are talking about. He says, so no chance for discussion? Then I must talk to the royal family of Natura, and I heard that the Prince of Natura is visiting your country? Wine enters and says, I heard you wanted to meet me. I am Wine, Crown Prince of Natura. Wine says, let's get to the point. I heard this is about the goods exported to your kingdom. Sergis replies, yes, I hope you cancel the export of imperial goods to the west through Natura. The empire is the enemy of Levitia, and historically your kingdom had strong ties with the east, and even though you are of the blood of Callias, I ask you to act like a respectable westerner. Wine says, I understand your view, but the goods we export are originally made in Natura. Sergis says, you can't fool me, and about the strange yellow clothing young people in my kingdom love, as if it's a nature-made product. Wine says, do you think Natura cannot produce goods appealing to refined Western tastes? Sergis says, the matter is bigger than just trade goods because the empire sells to travelers passing through the Marden area, and as someone of Callias blood you know this is wrong because it insults us. Wine says, you have the right to say our policy causes you a religious problem, but you're not part of the holy elite to object to anything else. Anything more you want to discuss? Sergis says, I'll return to Solgist and discuss again. You'll regret this day. Zeno says to Wine, I'm sorry I made you listen to such nonsense. I didn't expect your presence, your highness. Wine replies, it's nothing, and good I learned Sergis's intentions, but I doubt this is the last time we see him. Wine arrives at Solgist and says, so this is the kingdom of Solgist, honestly beautiful. Ninim says, yes, it's a northern kingdom, but the port isn't surrounded by ice. Wine replies, yes, their trade is always active and they have open external markets, so Marden can benefit from new trade routes if it uses Solgist sea trade. Prince Wine arrives at King Growyer's castle, and the king says, thank you for visiting us, your highness. Wine replies, I should thank you for inviting me to your kingdom's celebration, King Growyer. Growyer says, sure, we have an agreement about freeing Miltars, and I think we should use the time and continue our talk. The servants lift the king's seat and they move to the hall. They enter and Wine says, who is this? She says, I'm happy to see you, your highness Prince Wine. I am the daughter of King Growyer, Princess Tulchella. Growyer says, didn't I tell you to stay in your room until I greet my guest? Tulchella replies, but Prince Wine is talked about all over the continent and I had to attend the session and meet him. Wine thinks to himself, I must use Tulchella to my side, and he says, I'd be glad if you join us, Princess Tulchella. Tulchella says, allow me to explain the dishes we will serve. This is white fish and salad with irresistible taste. Wine thinks, looks delicious, and when he eats he really enjoys and says, this is very good. They serve the second dish and Wine is amazed by its look and shocked by its taste and thinks, I'm not here to eat. His thoughts are cut by the roasted pork dish. He finishes eating and returns to his room. Wine in his room says to Ninim, I feel stomach pain. campaign. She says, rest and you'll be fine, but I'm surprised Growier didn't talk about any issues. Wine replies, I'll talk with him again tomorrow. At the same time with Princess Zeno, Heifa says, a letter arrived from Prime Minister Sergis from Delonio. Zeno says, another letter? Heifa reads it. The Marden area that includes Delonio was indebted to Marden, but after Marden disappeared its rights over the land were seized, and we must reclaim it immediately. Zeno says, we were going to buy the land, but respecting Delonio we agreed to the loan. Tell them we refuse. Heifa says, but they might threaten us with attack. We will show our strength if needed, but must avoid any possible war. Princess Tulcella says, now we can end the opening ceremony. Wine meets King Growier and says, I need to talk to you, your majesty. The king says, well, it's breakfast time. Come with me to the grand hall. Wine says, but this is important. The king replies, I have more important things, and Wine gets annoyed by the king's ignoring. Each time Wine tries to speak, the king avoids him. Wine sits and says to Ninim, Solgist and Delonio have bad relations. If an alliance happens between Natura and Delonio, things will turn worse, so Growier invited us to push for alliance. Ninim asks, then why is Growier avoiding you and why invite you if he doesn't want the alliance? Wine says, assassination. Maybe he's planning something during my absence from Natura. Wine says to Ninim, prepare what we need to leave. A servant knocks and says, a message from His Majesty asking to see you. Wine and Ninim go to the king. He says, I heard you wanted to talk. Let's talk now. Wine agrees and the king says, I want an alliance between Natura and Solgis to overcome any unrest. What do you think? Wine says, and I accept your offer. Wine leaves and Growier says with evil delight, my plan is going well, right Sergis? Sergis smiles. The next day at Natura's castle Wine says, I knew the king was planning something. Ninim says, and no one attacked us on the way as you expected. Wine asks, what does that mean? The commander enters and apologizes for interrupting but says, there's important news, your highness. Ninim reads the message and says, Delonio attacked the Marden area from the border and Solgist launched a military campaign against Natura. Wine says, Growier declared war on us. At the same time Growier in the dining hall says, I enjoy wars very much, especially with someone strong and rare like Prince Wine. Prince Wine is furious and says, I knew this would happen from the start. How could he agree to alliance then betray us? Ninim says, it was only a talk, no official document. Wine slams the desk angrily and says, then we must face them. Gather all our forces fast, but the fight will be hard. He summons Zeno, and she says, I'm sorry, your highness. I'm the reason for all this. I shouldn't have answered Delonio's letter. Wine asks her, what are you planning to do? She replies, we make peace between us and Delonio because Solgist attacked Natura threatening Marden, and I'm on my way to Solgist. May I have a chance? Wine says, I'm surprised. I was going to ask you to do that, and I know you're not to blame for what happened. Wine and Zeno are on their way to Delonio, and Wine says, Delonio attacked Natura and now Solgist's presence to help Delonio is the biggest proof of their betrayal. Zeno replies, and yet Solgist is the only army that tried to invade Natura. At the same time King Growier says, war is really boring. I thought Prince Wine would try to trick me somehow. The commander interrupts and says, important news, your majesty. We discovered the Natura army. Their numbers are about 7,000 or 8,000, but Prince Wine is not with them. The king says, so Prince Wine used the alliance plan to stop our army, but Sergis won't be affected, and so I won't face the prince in battle. He is shocked by an army attack and says, an ambush? Meanwhile, Wine arrives at Sergis's palace and says, thanks for agreeing to meet us, Sergis. Sergis says, I expected you would come after I decided to invade Natura. Zeno says, the war between Marden and your kingdom started because of territorial claims, and we're here to find a solution because it was just a misunderstanding. Sergis says, we demand the land we gave you. And weren't you, Princess Zeno, the one who refused my letter? We will take back our land from Delonio to Marden and we'll take it. We don't need to negotiate with you, Lady Zeno. Zeno says, and you are so sure you can win? Sergis says, are you implying Natura would defeat Solgist? Impossible. Zeno says, you should be worried about the Natura army. Sergis says, I'll rethink the matter even though I promised Solgist to return the land once I take it. Zeno says challengingly, you will give Delonio double the land. Sergis says, nothing will make me change my mind. Wine says to Sergis, now it's my turn to tell you why I'm here. Sergis says, and what is the reason? Wine says, how about we go fight Growier? Meanwhile, King Growier says, the Natrons formed a defensive line. If they stay like that, my officers and soldiers will surrender, so there must be a surprise attack. A soldier reports, the Natrons are withdrawing from their camp, and they rejoice thinking they have won. Sergis says, you want me to go fight King Growier? And why would I agree? Wine replies, Solgist's power is increasing, and that's what we feared. You will lose many many soldiers in upcoming wars. Sergius says, I can't join you and stand against Solgist, but I could accept those fleeing your land and take them as refugees. Wine says, deal, and I'll send you 800,000 refugees from my kingdom. Sergius is shocked and Wine continues, as you know Solgist's army is strong and will defeat Natra. I fear for my people and want a safe place for them. Sergius says, I can accept 100,000 or 200,000, but 800,000. Our kingdom isn't ready for such a huge number. Wine says, I expected you'd say that, but there's no other solution. Sergius says, then I'll have to use military force against your people. Many will die before reaching us. Wine says, can your army attack 800,000? Zeno is impressed by Wine's cleverness. Wine says, I did that with my people. I sent 30,000 from Miltars. Sergius says angrily, I could kill you right here. Their talk is cut by the commander entering and saying, we got news from the battle. The Natra army was defeated by Solgist. Wine says, as I expected, because Solgist's army is stronger. No time, they're probably on their way to our capital. Elsewhere, L'Oreal says, are you okay, Hagal? Hagal says, I'm very okay. L'Oreal says, good that you returned. Hagal says, the ambush plan the prince set was right, but we failed to kill the king. L'Oreal says, it's not easy to kill a man like that with one strike. Flanila is sitting with the master, and he says, it's hard to know anything about Wine now, but we heard news from the front. Despite the losses and retreat, the confirmed report is the Natra army was defeated. Flanila asks, Wine planned all this, right? He answers, yes, because he knew what would happen with both armies' strength and the distance from Delonio's capital. He was trying to predict everything, even the negotiation with Sergius. Flanila asks, so he planned for negotiation and Natra's army retreat? He says, yes. Wine is still waiting for Sergius's answer. Sergius says, you call this negotiation? Wine says, maybe the Natra army can regroup after the first retreat to fight Solgist. I want Delonio's army to attack them from behind. Sergius agrees. L'Oreal says to Ninim and Hagal, we have no chance, it's only a matter of time before defeat. Ninim replies, that won't happen, look who's here. Wine appears on horseback with Delonio's forces and says, looks like I arrived just in time. The battle begins and Hagal and L'Oreal move toward King Groir. Ninim suddenly appears with a sword and in an instant kills him. The soldiers raise Natra's banner. In Natra's kingdom, Prince Wine enters the office and is shocked and says, you are King Groir? He replies, yes, I am. Wine asks, how did your appearance change? Groir says, I lost weight when I was injured. Anyway, why are you here, your highness? Did you set my execution date? Wine says, I have no intention of killing you. All this happened because the kingdom's circumstances forced me to kill you, and I still stand by that. I want an alliance between us and the kingdom of Solgist. Groir says, and Sergius will agree? Wine replies, he was removed from the throne. Groir says, so Natra doesn't want war with Levitia and is sparing my execution. That's why Sergius was deposed. Wine says, can you sign here? Groir says, I'm ready to die. I'll die anyway and won't sign any paper. I have one condition to return to my kingdom. Wine says, what is your condition? Groir says, I want to know, your highness, the truth about the monster inside you, and will you continue the plan of the three kingdoms? Wine says, it's not important, but know this. If you die here, King Groir, you won't hear your answer. Groir laughs and says, I surrender. I won't die until I hear it from you. Wine says, you're not the only one who wants to know what the monster inside me will do next.